Hello, everybody, and welcome to CFL Talk. Yes, we have a very special guest with us today, of course, along with David Morisuti, Daryl Davis, DD, as he's known around the business. Not spending much time with the FRC, but man, are you busy now? You're doing all these stories. What's it like? What's been the transition been like?
Oh, it's great, man. I'm back writing at the newspaper, and I'm still a writer at heart, but I'm doing radio with the Green Zone with Jamie Nye on CGME, and I taught a university class in journalism this year, so they're getting my bad advice there, too. They know how to use sports cliches.
Oh, good for them.
Yeah.
David, how's your week going?
It's going pretty good. It's the weather suggesting we're ready for some football. That's for sure.
I don't know. To me over here, it suggested the beach to me. I don't know about you, but that's what it was suggesting to me. I took one look out there and said, hey, the beach looks like an idea. Well, we're finally there. We're back at the beginning of a new season when, it begins, the actual seeing of players playing football. Daryl, what did you think the first time you went to practice so far this year?
Yeah, the rookie camp was last week in Saskatoon, but training camp started in Saskatoon on Sunday. I'm 2.5 hour drive away in Regina, home of the Rough Riders, but they've been going to training camp there for decades. I counted, Frank and David, this was my 37th training camp I've been at with the Rough Riders, and I've been employed in the media for all of them, so I'm not freeloading, I guess. I always file for expenses. The feeling around, and you're talking about the beach a little bit, Frank. It was like 30 degrees on a warm day, so it was kind of nice. It felt like football weather once again. I know the guys who come from the southern states, it's not too hot for them, but because it's not very humid up here in Saskatchewan. But looked like a good workout. A lot of expectations. That was the first column I wrote this season, guys. That it's a season of great expectations for the Rough Riders. After last year, it was kind of a surprise how well they did, right? A new roster in place, a new coaching staff. They lost their quarterback, Trevor Harris, for 5 or 6 games last year. So the fact that they made it to the West Division final was really kind of exciting for the people around here after 2 years of not making the playoffs. And now, because they've kept basically that core together, everybody likes Corey Mason as the head coach. He's got a decent coaching staff. They're still learning, of course, but they've gotten better. And I think now everybody's expecting this team to contend for the Grey Cup and be at least the Western representative in the championship game.
What do you think, like, when you look at how the last few years have gone? We know that, this team has gone on, made it to the playoffs, and it's always kind of like that one game that they need to win to get to the Grey Cup, and it hasn't happened for them. Then they turn the chapter. They go with, Corey, bit of an unproven coach. He, helped this team take strides. It's kind of like that same result in the end there, where they finished short of their goal. How do you see the mindset? Have you seen the mindset kind of change in how they're approaching this year, 2 past years? Or you feel like they just kind of want to keep with the program?
Well, I think last year they really had a belief that they were going to get past that game, David, that they were going to get past the West final. I didn't think it was realistic with a rebuilt organization. They certainly did, though, right? You couldn't convince them otherwise. The thing that stands in their way all the times isn't so much them. It's been the Winnipeg Blue Bombers have stood in their way, right? Winnipeg's been every Grey Cups, and if we want to go, how many? What's it? 5 in a row, right? So for the Bombers, and the Rough Riders have lost several of those. If I were to count 1, 2, 3 of them, I believe of the times they got there, they went through the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. So that's been the issue. Are the Bombers weaker this year? Probably. Are the Rough Riders stronger this year? Probably. So maybe that's the hurdle they have to get over. There is a bit of a psychological block, probably a bit, because they haven't gotten past it. But the fact that they're better and I think ready to give them a shot and to track them down. Trevor Harris is a pretty decent quarterback when he's healthy. They've added all the pieces. They got a good offensive line. There's so many good players on this football team now. They made some great additions through free agency. So mentally, physically, they're ready. Mentally, are they ready to get by the Bombers? I think it's probably their time to get by it, and that's one of the things that they've talked about as a team quite a bit.
One of the most important characteristics they needed to change, and David and I knew Corey pretty well and understood the regimen that he sets for his people, whoever he's in charge of. He's a very accountability-oriented guy. He believes in accountability. And I think that was one of the things that hurt Saskatchewan before he came more than anything, was the accountability and the consistency of the team. Did you see how quickly did you see the change in attitude on the sidelines and in practice?
You make a really good point on that, Frank. I've seen a lot of coaches. I've lost count of how many coaches I've dealt with in 40 some years covering the CFL and covering the Rough Riders specifically. When you saw some of these coaches, they never held their players up for account. They were irresponsible in a lot of ways, and they didn't face the music, and the coach made excuses for them. It doesn't work that way with Corey Mace. You make a really good point. These players, when they make a mistake, they apologize to their teammates. They apologize to the fans through the media. They face up to it. None of them duck. None of them treat that mea culpas as something trivial either. They're there up front talking to us, the media, the mainstream media anyway, the very next day saying, I shouldn't have done that. I've learned from my mistake. And they do learn from their mistake. And that allows you to say, okay, that story's done. Let's move on, from our point of view and the media's point of view, for sure. And I think that teaches them a lot of, it makes them a mature football team, which I was absolutely so impressed to deal with last year. I even told Corey Mace at the end of the year, I've never dealt with a more mature, responsible football team. How many years have I been doing it? I don't, as I said, 37 or something, I think. So 40 years. Nobody has made their players more accountable than Corey Mace has. And I think that goes a long way, especially in this community, right? It's a community-owned franchise. Everyone knows who the players are. If they're out at bars, if they're at the casino, if they're shopping in a grocery store, everybody knows who these players are. So they have to be on their best behavior all the time. And I think that Corey Mace has told them that, and they deal with it pretty well. It's a great point, Frank. And I think this city, Saskatchewan, Regina, Saskatchewan, more than anyone, any of them, makes that important to be a part of this football team.
And I'll drill down just a tiny bit further and suggest that one of the keys to him being successful in that regard is that he holds himself accountable. Through the season last year, he stood up and said a couple of times, "That's on me." And that helps build that trust between the coach and the players, and universal accountability, not just, okay, you got to be accountable. Don't look at what I'm doing. Corey's not one of those guys.
No, you can't get away with making a mistake constantly and saying, oh, I blew it. But there were some rare ones. They had some strategic mistakes because he and Mark Mueller, the offensive coordinator, are still kind of new in their formal roles. They're managing clock. They're managing gambles. When do you try a short, a fake kick or something? So they're thinking about all those things. And they made a couple of boo-boos, but they did face them afterwards. And they all said, we're getting better at this, right? And you could see the progression as the season went along. So, yes, Corey Mace does it. He moved here as his family is here. That's the first coach. It used to be a prerequisite for any coach who was hired here to live in Saskatchewan year-round. Chris Jones didn't, Craig Dickinson didn't, but Corey Mace did bring his family here. He's a part of the community. Every time you turn around, there's an agricultural show called Agribition. He's putting the brand on the cow the first day of it. There's a women's hockey league. He's out there dropping the ceremonial puck for the start of the season or start of a game. So he's part of it. He really has adapted to Saskatchewan, to being here. It's a unique place. You guys have been here probably and are aware of it. And he has fit right in so perfectly. The fans love him. If he says, I made a mistake, they forgive him because, as you said, Frank, he stands up and says, I made a mistake. I promise that I've learned from it, and let's move on.
There's just one last thing, David, then you got him. There's a difference between, in accountability, there's accountability where you admit you made a mistake with the intention of correcting it. And then there's the admission of making a mistake just to get the pressure off. There's two different ways of admitting to mistakes. Corey's a genuine guy. When he says he made a mistake, it's something that he's realized he's made a mistake, and he's already worked on the solution.
Yeah, he doesn't care about the reason he does care about his image, but only because he's honest about it, right? It's not as you say, he's not trying to hide it or slough it under or brush it under a rug somewhere. He's saying, this is what happened. What have we learned from it? And let's move ahead. Yeah, he's not. No way is he trying to avoid it or just move past it. He's trying to use it as a learning experience, and that's great for this football team and for this community.
Yeah, you brought up the living year round. That's something that Ryan Dinwiddie did right away when he got to Toronto. He moved his whole family, and he credits, obviously it's a big change, right? Especially, he's coming this at this point. He was coming from Calgary to Toronto, but he's American, right? So
Yeah.
it takes a little bit of a time to adjust. But he's not the only coach that's had to make a move and change. Andrew Harris. How does it feel seeing Andrew Harris in Saskatchewan Roughrider gear on the sidelines working with players?
He was nervous about it. He's talked quite a bit about wearing green. He's never worn green, right? He wore BC Lions orange and Winnipeg Blue Bombers blue and Toronto Argonauts blue. So he's for him, it's quite a change. He was public enemy number one around here for a while. It's because he played so well against his football team. You know, how many Labor Day Classics did he run for? How many touchdowns in Regina? So. But you know what? His career's over. Now his playing career's over. The fans here respect players who have played hard, and there's very few players who have played as hard or as productively as Andrew Harris has. And the fact that he said, you know what, I'm nervous about being here, but I really want to help. It's my first coaching job. And, when you get vouched for by Corey Mace, that helps a little bit. And Andrew Harris, when I say he was public enemy number one, he wasn't hated. He was respected and disliked because he played for the opposition. But he wasn't a hated person. He's never been a really bad guy, right? He's part. He likes being part of the community too, and you see him dealing with people, and you see him dealing with players. It does look, David, you're right, to see him funny to see him in green, but I think we'll get used to that after a couple of weeks of watching him walk around wearing Rider merchandise.
And it's no coincidence who he's coaching, a former teammate in AJ Ouellette. Do you feel like that was part of the reason that they saw that fit work really well in trying to get AJ? AJ's, I think he's done well in Saskatchewan, but I'm sure there's a little more that they're expecting out of him, considering he was one of the top running backs when he got to the open market.
Yeah, the fact they played together in Toronto and AJ Ouellette has said Andrew Harris helped him, and the platoon worked out so well between the two of them. They won a Grey Cup together, right? And I'm sure Andrew Harris, between the two of them, they said that he's helped AJ Ouellette. You know what? I should have asked if the weight loss and the rebuilding his body was from AJ Ouellette's point of view, was partly suggested by Andrew Harris. AJ Ouellette told me he didn't like the cuts. He was only able to make one cut last year rather than two or three, and that's why he lost the weight, so that it would be easier to make the cuts. So that then he would be a little bit more of an Andrew Harris type runner, to be honest. Yes. The reason that he's here, they do get along. Ouellette's coachable. He listens to his coaches, and he's listened to Andrew Harris along the way. And I think that because they had an opening in the job market, you want to give young coaches a chance. Andrew Harris is somebody who's been around the CFL a long time. He wants to try coaching. Give him a chance. And with the coaching cap and the numbers cap and everything, you have to try some new guys every year because you don't have huge salaries to give them. So Andrew Harris wants to continue his career. Take it wherever you get it. He knows Corey Mace pretty well, as so many people do. It's a great opportunity for him. Remember, Mark Mueller, who's now the Riders' offensive coordinator, had to start somewhere too. He started as a linebackers coach in Calgary to start with, right? Corey Mace was a defensive line coach with Calgary. So give these guys an opportunity. And I'm not disparaging Americans at all. These are young Canadians who have grown up in the system. Give them that chance and that toehold, and let them work their way up. If they not good at it, well, then they'll find something else to do. But if they do, progress the way they're supposed to, watch a lot of videos, sleep in the office, you know what those coaches are like, then they can progress a long ways and maybe become a head coach somewhere along the way.
Well, you know what they say about necessity? It's the mother of invention, and the necessity to bring in coaches who are willing to work for less salary. And then you find out some talent there, some diamonds in the rough. The league has done I'm amazed at the turnover of young coaches. Two things that have changed drastically in the last couple of years are the coaches and where they come from and how long they last. It's not the regular, circuit that coaches get on, and the same coaches move around the whole league. And the same's true for quarterbacks. There's kind of a symbiotic relationship between quarterbacks and coaches right now, where we're getting a lot of them sticking around. The first number one quarterbacks are having no problem being a second quarterback. And we learned last year in the Grey Cup that you can be the third in line and make it to the Grey Cup and win. So we're finding out a lot of great things about new coaches with new thinking, and in turn helping a lot of quarterbacks extend their career.
Interesting point about the coaches, Frank. I agree with you when you stop and think about it. You know, there's the Rich Stubers and the Adam Ritas who used to bounce around from team to team. Not so many of those anymore. There are a few guys that bounce back and forth, but it seems to be a lot less of it. I think the coaching cap has a lot to do with it, and I think that's a great thing because, you know, the Riders called up Josh Donnelly, who used to be a University of Regina quarterback for the last 2 years. He's been the offensive coordinator with the University of Regina team. Now he's on the Riders staff. There are those opportunities more and more because maybe, you know, the Americans can't afford to stay up here for as long, right? They'll give it a shot and then maybe move back down to the States rather than make a career out of it in Canada. I don't have a problem with that. You know, turnover in our profession, in all professions, is good. And I think the cap does that. The cap is the administrative cap has done a good job of bringing in good young players. And look at this: what 4 of the coaches are Canadian. I love that part. I'm still Canadian at heart, and Ryan Dinwiddie's a good coach. A lot of these guys are great coaches. I'm glad they're here, but giving opportunities to the Canadians is an important thing, and I think it's done that. And maybe it's because of that rotating cycle a little bit in the coaching fraternity. It does speak a little bit about the quarterbacks too. That you know, a couple of years ago, I was thinking, how many Hall of Famers are there in this starting classes? You know, is Cody Fajardo a Hall of Famer? I don't know. Yeah, maybe after winning a Grey Cup, you have to consider him. Bo Levi Mitchell, probably, right? Is Trevor Harris one? Well, he's never won a Grey Cup as a starting quarterback. So does he become a Hall of Famer based on stats alone? Maybe. But so a lot of those guys are taking a step backwards, as you say, right? McLeod Bethel Thompson. They want to stay because the backup quarterback still makes a decent living up in the Canadian Football League, and they're helping the younger quarterbacks. So the rotation is the quarterback group as a whole, I think, is stronger. Right now, I don't know if it's at the highest it's ever been for starting quarterbacks. There's still some unproven guys right there now taking the leads of each of their teams, and maybe they'll get better, and they'll probably get better because they're being helped by veteran quarterbacks who have learned the ropes. And it's an interesting concept to think that these good, very solid, good starting quarterbacks who have been around for years are now helping the younger guys. And that I like to see that. That's mentorship at its absolute best, isn't it?
Yeah, well, for me, that's the connection between coaches and quarterbacks. Necessity has been the inventor, you know, of things. And it's great that we have, as you know, and I think you've sat close to one of the worst occasions where if you lose a quarterback, a number one quarterback, your season's done. I mean, it's just terrible that, you know, we need all these quarterbacks in the league. The league has to have more than a quarterback per team. They literally have to have 2 quarterbacks. Yeah. And that's why what happened with the Argos last year is such an eye-opening situation where you have a guy that literally was a walk-on in training camp, didn't know he'd get a job, ends up starting and winning the Grey Cup and being an MOP. I love those stories. And as a writer, you must.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, talking to Nick Arbuckle afterwards and what's in the future for him and how thrilled he was and how surprised he was. You're right. It used to be, you'd think, well, who cares about the third string quarterback? Because nothing's good. If they get down to the third stringer, they don't have a chance. But now it's the other. They are much more important. You're right. They're getting hurt more often, it seems like, which is unfortunate. And you do have to build them. And because, like, look at the Rough Riders quarterback room. As a whole, as a 3-piece part, it's as good as anybody. I know Trevor Harris is 39 years old, so he's wearing down, but he's still an incredibly accurate passer who gets the job done. They got Jake Mayer, who is started 45 CFL games from Calgary as a free agent. He's their backup. And Tommy Stevens, who is absolutely unstoppable as a short yardage quarterback. And you could probably put him in to run an offense if they lose the top 2 guys. You've got a proven guy there too. So you're right. 1 to 3 now, it does matter. It used to be just kind of that rookie guy would be the third stringer, but because there are so many quarterbacks floating around who have started a couple games here and there, you can actually fill your quarterback room with guys who have CFL starts under their belts and maybe win a Grey Cup with your third stringer behind the center.
That's the biggest change over the last couple of years. Not a starter and a short yardage guy. You got 2 starters and a short yardage guy, maybe.
Yep. Fair enough.
Big changes, David.
And the team also drafted a quarterback this year, maybe one that we're not going to see for the next few years. We're not, obviously. It's always tough to determine what's going to happen with guys when they go and get NFL opportunities. But like, what did you think about the Riders using a pick on a quarterback, especially like Curtis Rourke, who got drafted to, not one that's getting a training camp deal and trying to make it a J camp, but one that was actually drafted in the NFL draft.
Yeah. Usually I'll wonder if the Riders are drafting somebody in the first couple of rounds who isn't going to show up for a while or who has been drafted. Kyle Hergel, right, the offensive lineman they took last year, stayed with New Orleans, and you kind of give them, that's a bad choice if it's your first choice and you're not ever going to get them. Mm-hmm. And Jeremy O'Day, the general manager of the Riders, said a couple times, you know what, we'll try that mix and match it a couple times. I don't want to lose my first rounder every year. I'm not going to take an NFL draft pick with my first CFL draft pick every year, because then we'll never get good talent. But once in a while, it's worth a risk in that respect. This year, their first two picks, Eric Anderson, second round offensive lineman, just showed up at camp the other day. Ali Saad, the defensive lineman from Bowling Green, their first round pick, showed up at camp yesterday or today. So those are their first two picks. Good players, got NFL minicamp invites. It's tough to make a team as any NFL minicamper, but it shows that they're pretty good players. So those are two very good picks. To take Curtis Rourke where they did in the third round, I think was a really smart, good place to take him. If he shows up, David, you're right, he might not show up for a few years. San Francisco's certainly going to take a look at him. They've done a pretty good job with late round draft picks at quarterback, right, when you think about it. So the fact that Rourke is in camp with the 49ers and is still on Saskatchewan's protected list, Trevor Harris and Jake Mayer are here for a while. If Curtis Rourke shows up in 3 or 4 years or never shows up, well, it's not a horrible risk to take. It's a nice gamble just in case he shows up. And then how strong are they at quarterback in the future? I gave as critical as I can get as Jeremy O'Day sometimes for how he drafts or taking silly chances. That in my mind, David, that was not a silly risk at all. I think it's a pretty solid pick at third after you for sure are going to get your first 2 round picks into the roster somewhere along the line.
Talking about the draft and talking about building a team, you start with a coach, you get a quarterback, and then your Canadian talent. Is it my imagination, or do you also agree that teams are depending more on instant gratification from the draft picks? We've seen some really great Grey Cup games of rookies or even second-year guys. That's another thing that's improved in the Canadian Football League over the past couple of years, yes?
Yeah. When you think about the Philpots coming in and making an impact right away, how about last year, the Riders' 7th round pick, Ajo, right?
Yes.
Who had NFL aspirations, comes in and starts, and now he's gone to the Indianapolis Colts of the NFL. What a great pick he was. He had a big X beside him that everybody was scared to take him, and then he was a model citizen here. He played great. He was, if you've ever talked to him, he's a wonderful personality, and he really fit in pretty well. How about Dale Duncan Busby, who they drafted, right? Stepped in last year. Sam Emelis, the year before, receiver, started playing a little bit as a rookie. They're deep enough that they can kind of slowly put these guys into the roster. So yes, they're getting better and better and more contributions from guys. I'm thinking Eric Anderson, that offensive lineman, might make it into the roster this year because you go through a lot of offensive linemen during the course of the season. So they are relying on Canadian players quicker. There are more Canadians playing in the NFL. There are more Canadians at that high a caliber that they can step into the CFL. It used to be a Canadian would take 3 years absolutely before you would really say, oh yeah, he's going to make it or he's not going to make it. And that's when you probably cut him. But these guys, they progress them. They put them in 4 games 1 year and let them start a little bit if they have to fill in for an injury. But they seem much more ready to play. That's a tribute to the Canadian football programs that they've been in, the university programs. Plus, they're good athletes when they go down to the States. So yes, it's impressive to watch, and anything that helps get more Canadians in high impact spots or higher profile in this league. I'm not against the Americans. I understand it's important, but I'm always going to cheer for more Canadian content, more Canadian players, more people with image who you've watched grow up. That's why we like the NHL. We've watched these kids grow up, and you get to see Jordan Eberle was my neighbor. Now I get to see him play in the NHL. When you see those kids advance to the Canadian Football League, I think it can help you with local interest, with ticket sales, with TV interest, and all those things, Frank. So yes, get more Canadians involved, and they're better, so they're stepping in quicker into higher profile roles, right? We're not just talking offensive linemen being drafted now. We're talking linebackers, receivers, a quarterback, 2 quarterbacks getting drafted, Canadians. So that's great, and I think it will really help the CFL.
That's why it's important, the Canadian coaches, fair or unfair, real or unreal. American coaches don't look at Canadian players the way they do at American players, the same way they don't look at American quarterbacks as they do Canadian quarterbacks. So that's another helpful thing, because the Canadian component of the Canadian Football League, it's required if you want to win a Grey Cup.
Of course it is. Don't you think the team with the best Canadian content almost always wins a Grey Cup?
Pretty much.
So that's important.
It also, I think, was a big part of this offseason too. I know, like when you look at what Edmonton did, they didn't just go and grab some of the top free agents; they grabbed some of the top Canadian guys too on the market there. When you look at Saskatchewan's chances this year, what's the team? I think you in your mind. I know maybe Winnipeg might be the answer, but what team is the biggest challenge for them this year in the West?
Edmonton is really rebuilt. I think that they're going to be stronger, but they were in such a hole to start with. Edmonton and Calgary are going to make improvements. You're still right about that, David. Until you knock off the kingpin, and that's the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, they have to get by that psychological hurdle, which we talked about a little bit earlier. Winnipeg still knows how to win. Going into the last year's West Final, you thought, boy, I think it's Saskatchewan. They're just on a roll, right? Saskatchewan finished the season so strong, and you thought maybe they're just going to carry that momentum in, and they lose soundly. 38-22, I think the score was, right? Something happens. The Bombers, how many times have we said, oh, man, they've lost 3 or 4 in a row. Their reign is over. They're not the good team anymore. And somehow they piece it together. That's a tribute to Mike O'Shea and the coaching staff, obviously, but also the staff, the players they have who know how to win. Once again, they're going to have to get by Winnipeg. I think the Riders, call me a homer if you want, but when I look it over, I think the Rough Riders might actually should finish first in the West, and that gives them an advantage playing at home too. It gets the bye through the first one, and then if they have Winnipeg to play here, that's a huge advantage for them, and I think that they're certainly capable of getting there. I haven't picked the Riders to win the West for, I don't know how many decades it's been. They surprised me in 2013.
Wasn't bad. Was pretty
2013, yeah, that was even surprised me a little bit, right? How good they were that year. In 07, they just came out of the blue. So predicting the Rough Riders to be a Grey Cup contender is few and far between times that it happens, but this might be one of those years where I say that I think they certainly have a chance to do it. And as your question, Dave, yeah, they have to get by Winnipeg. That's still the biggest hurdle for them in the long run. But they play Winnipeg like back-to-back in the preseason, and then I think 3 times during the regular season. So they'll know how to beat them or how not to beat them by the time the season ends.
Mm-hmm. They'll be going to school.
Yeah.
Okay. We only have another minute or two with you, but I can't let you go without talking to you about the new commissioner. How does the previous commissioner, Randy Ambrosie, set up the new commissioner?
Well, Randy's strength was I liked Randy as a person, and I like Stu as a person too. Randy messed things up with the Genius Sports stuff, right? And he wasn't ready for for asking for funding from the federal government. 2 things that really made the CFL look bad, and I think those are the 2 things that cost him his job. But give Randy Ambrosie credit. In the 40 years I've been talking about it, and I'm sorry to harp on it, but I don't ever remember a stronger group of owners. Ownership top to bottom. Is there a group that you have to worry about paying its bills this year? No. And that's like going back decades and decades. There's never been a group that's this strong at the ownership level. Do they meddle too much? Yes, they all meddle too much, and that's why they go through so many commissioners, right? They've got to stand back and let the boss be he's not the boss in this organization, right? It's not like Goodell, or Manfred or Silver get to run the show the way they think is best. It's 9 guys pulling in different directions in the CFL, and that's what hurts the league as much as anything. Ambrosie couldn't survive it. Very few people can survive it for very long. But Randy has put in those strong owners also have strong business opinions. So that means the league is in very good shape. You don't have to worry about somebody paying bills. You don't have to worry about all our profits are going to have to go cover the Montreal Alouettes because they've lost their owner. So they don't have those worries anymore, so they can move forward. Stuart Johnson knows these people very well. I call him Stu, Frank, because how many times do we see him at our FRC luncheon every year? He's the guy who paid for brunch every year all the time. So So to have somebody we know that well, who knows the inner workings of the CFL, who knows the owners, who has gained their respect over the years, who knows the media field as well as he does, I think they're in good shape. I think they made a good hiring. I know he's a lifelong football fan. And Ambrosi, give him credit, set the table for him in a very good way with the ownership stuff. He made a couple of mistakes, but Stuart Johnson has a good starting place. He's not gung-ho about getting a 10th franchise. I still think that's something they have to work on, but he has other things to work on first, stabilize everything, get those owners working together, and let him be in charge for maybe 15 or 20 years, and then this league could really thrive.
I think, to be fair to Randy as well, he left the game in good shape as well. A lot of the rule changes have been well received, and the game has received the changes well as well.
Yeah, that's true, and hopefully it's safer. That's what we've been hoping for. Randy's a former player. Once in a while, you start wondering, is the game safer? Well, yes. And is it still football? Yes, it's still football. There's still a lot of exciting games, and I just can't wait for this season to get started again. So it's fun talking to you guys about all of this because it gets the blood going, doesn't it?
Yep.
Absolutely. Used to be, is it June yet? Now is it May yet? And guess what? It is. So we're ready for football, aren't we, guys?
Absolutely. You bet.
Daryl, I really appreciate you coming in and doing this. We enjoyed picking your brain. Good luck with your covering all the sports that you're covering, and hopefully you'll have time to cover the Saskatchewan Roughriders as well.
Always. It's always fun watching them. And people care about here. Saskatchewan, we say that people care about the crops, the legislature, and the football team in varying degrees of importance. So right now, I think the football team's at the top of the world. So talk to you soon, guys. Take care. It's always good to see you.
Thanks Daryl.
Thanks, Daryl. That's Daryl Davis. You'll always see him at practice with the Riders, and you can turn yourself off and go off.
Okay, I'm headed out the door. It's great to see you guys, by the way.
See ya.
Okay, thanks for the invitation. Bye-bye.
You're welcome anytime.
All right.
Technology is what technology is, David.
Yes, it is.
It was fun talking to him. We spend for those of you that watch the game and you get to know the players, we have an extra level of recognition, and that is the rest of the reporters. We run into them. We get a chance to see and feel their passion for the game. Some of them feel it more than others. Some of them are tied to teams a little more than others. Daryl's been kind of all that. And as a member of the FRC, which is the Football Writers of Canada, Daryl was the big guy at the Football Writers of Canada when I first joined. And he was very helpful in helping me to negotiate being a reporter in the Canadian Football League. And a lot of my Grey Cup experience was thanks to him. And I'm grateful for every opportunity that he's given me and the FRC has given me. A great opportunity to cover the Grey Cup, as David and I have done over the past few years. I guess anything you want to put a period at the end of the sentence with Saskatchewan. It's nice to know their running back is feeling at home there. We know that they really appreciate the coach, both of them former Argos that we know real well. Andrew Harris as well. That team is building, and you can see them start to craft maybe a team that, like you said, can compete for a seat at the Grey Cup.
Yeah, I'm always curious about their offense. Is their offense going to be good enough to go toe-to-toe with the top teams in the league? Because they got the quarterback. Trevor Harris has been around the block. He's led teams to Grey Cups. Obviously, he's still trying to win that championship, but they've always been a good team. They've always been a good organization, but it feels like they've never had that, superstar that, in some cases, like they haven't been like, they've always had really good defenses. They've always had really tough play against defense, but offensively, they've never really been the one that teams have good offenses, but not ones I find that are scary to go up against. So I feel like that's something that maybe they're going to have to really solidify this year.
Yeah. And if Harris can't do it for him, can Meyer be their Arbuckle?
Right.
Because that's what he's there for. He's there to pick up the ball in case it's dropped. And because of Harris's age, there is the challenge. Will he be able to play a complete season? Will he have time when he can't play? And will Meyer be the guy to keep the team on a good footing to work their way to ultimately what they want? And every team wants when they start the CFL season is first. Everybody wants to be able to divide the playoff games in two.
Well, that's it, right? The one thing that Winnipeg has always been able to do is win the West. They win the West. They go out to host the game. If you're Saskatchewan, that's a trend you got to reverse. And look, like Winnipeg has gone through some changes. They're not going to have their quarterback for game one. I'm sure that's something we'll talk about in a second here. But, Calgary has been through some turnover. They got a new quarterback, which means, it can either go really good or it can go, take some time for that all to settle in. Edmonton is the real, obviously the one. It's just like, are they as good as what they look like on paper? Can they put it together? So Saskatchewan is the one. It's like they got the most continuity, in my opinion, out of all the teams in the West. Maybe them and Winnipeg are kind of the two teams I look at here, because even BC's got a new coach. There's a lot of changes going around in that West. So can Saskatchewan catch lightning in a bottle in some way?
Well, every Grey Cup is followed by catching lightning in a bottle. I don't think, even heck, even when a favorite wins the Grey Cup, there's something that has to happen that irons it out for them, that puts them in there and, gives that extra little push they need to get to the win. So there's always a something that'll surprise you and that'll lift you up to a victory. The biggest thing that Saskatchewan has, and they're building the right way. They've got a coach that knows how to motivate his players. He knows how to create a cohesive unit. They've got a really good running back. We talked about him, who's tailoring his running game, which in recent years in the Canadian Football League, his body type was starting to be outdated in the Canadian Football League. He's literally changed his body into a type that we expect. Not that muscles and size isn't important, but there can be too big in the Canadian Football League for a running back today. And we've seen some smaller quarterbacks that are built strong and mean, don't need to be that big in the sense of what big is. You freeze, David? Yeah, David froze. Either he froze or I did. I don't know which one of us isn't here. Is it me or is it him? It looks like it's him. All right. We talked about the Saskatchewan Roughriders. We've got the Argos, of course, that we've talked about a lot. There is some news coming out of BC, and Mr. Weed is going to be the act to open the BC season. And that's something that I think is very funny and interesting. We talked a little bit about the commissioner, and again, what you're hearing is that he's now the commissioner because Randy lost the job. Randy Ambrosi lost the job. I'm not really sure that he lost the job. I think it's more or less what he was there to do and what he could do. He did. It was done. And another way of saying it is, the way Daryl said it, that the gambling thing didn't work out, or what he was trying to do just didn't work out. So it was time to move on. And now they brought in a media guy who maybe understands the media enough that they can expand that and also try to attract, the people in the virtual world that love the game of football and give them a chance to appreciate it. While you were gone, David, I started talking about something you wanted to talk about, and that is the first act in the regular season at BC Place.
Yeah, Snoop Dogg. I'm surprised actually, because I was like wondering to myself, who are they going to get this year? Because that's been BC's calling point, is finding a great act for the halftime show. Sorry, it's a kickoff. I'm just going to double check on this. Concert kickoff. So I think what they're going to do is they're going to have the concert first, then they're going to have the game.
It's the same. It's actually the same thing. They're just giving it a name, David. They're giving it.
Well, in a way, yes, but I mean, the whole point of this is that they get people in the building first for the concert, then hopefully they stay for the game.
Absolutely.
But again, like, it just goes to show the BC Lions get it. They totally get it. I understand the desire to, put the the Canadian content first, putting the league first, putting the game on the field first. But give it a little. What this does, it gives it lets people know this is a big deal for us to go out and get. We want to get the best that we can get in terms of talent to come and do a concert for the game. This just shows that they want to reach a different audience, reach a different fan base. Who would not want to go and watch the dog? The guy was he was a part of the Super Bowl halftime show a few years ago, right? So I think that this is a big win there for the BC Lions.
An excellent win, and the progressive thinking that's happening there in BC is important. The other thing is that one thing we've learned from this owner, patience isn't one of his strong suits.
No, and that's what led to the mass exodus of guys at the end of the season. New coach, new GM, Nathan Rourke is back. They spent a lot of money to try to win last year. They went over the cap and they paid for it. So, that was viewed as a big missed opportunity for them to be able to host the Grey Cup and then have a good team there. I'm hoping that we won't have to wait too long before there's a Grey Cup back in Vancouver, because that was a great experience. And also that city deserves another Grey Cup. And also you want to see this team at its competitive best. I want to see Nathan Rourke in a Grey Cup, and I want to see Nathan Rourke in a Grey Cup in Vancouver. I think that
you really want to hit the lottery, don't you?
Just massage it just as much as you can to make it happen, right, Frank?
Oh, hey, you know what? He's a great quarterback. He's a guy that last year I think it was too much. The experience in the NFL and then coming to the Canadian Football League, the rejection of the NFL combined with the necessity and dependence on the BC Lions on him was, I think, a little too much emotionally, and he just wasn't ready for it, and he was kind of I guess overwhelmed by the situation, not by his ability, not because of his ability, not because of his mentality, but because of the combination of everything that was going wrong in BC. It wasn't just him. He arrived at a place that was having a lot of problems. And I want to make sure when I say an impatient owner, I said that with a little bit of my tongue in cheek, because he really wasn't that impatient, because that coaching staff, that GM, they had an opportunity to do something over a pretty long period. It wasn't just overnight that the patience ran out. There were a couple of years there where the team trended in the wrong direction for too long, and he basically gave the coaching staff and the coach, he gave them enough money. In fact, they went over the cap in bringing in players to be successful, and they didn't succeed under those circumstances. And I guess that was basically the last straw. And they're starting over. Well, that's what happens. You can't expect ownership to reward failure. It's just not the way it works. So I don't know, how they'll do this year. I just know they've got a quarterback that we've seen that can play real well. And we know how important. We talked with Daryl about the importance of quarterbacks. So let's see. And we know how much Daryl loves Canadian quarterbacks. So this is a guy that could, help make the game that much more interesting. He sure did when he was here before.
Yeah, no, he definitely. And, it's not just a matter that they're doing better. It's a matter of they became such an exciting team in a lot of ways. They were the big play VA, right? That was a big thing for them. And so that's why the decision to go away from Vernon Adams and to go with Nathan Rourke, that's an interesting move. We know that Nathan Rourke was one of the better quarterbacks when he was in the league. I don't know if I agree with the decision that they made to put him in that position when he came back and he was barely able to get his footing under him. So I think if you're the owner, you gotta hope that you didn't tinker too much. At times, you always wonder if continuity sometimes is good, but at the same time, I think you're right. Like, he's been pretty patient. That's a team again. Like if I'm a West Division fan base, You got to be sick and tired of hearing about Winnipeg going to another Grey Cup and losing 3 in a row, right? That to me is just like, well, if you had a different team there, would it have been different if BC got in there, if Saskatchewan got in there, right? So if you're a team like BC, get to the postseason and try to win that, obviously you try to make it the one game if you can win the division, but it's the competition in the West is going to be fascinating this year. I think there are teams that have definitely gone better, and I'm curious to see which team is going to be the one that falls short of expectations, because one of them definitely will.
I think this is the era of there are no default playoff positions available in the Canadian Football League, East and West. They will have to be earned. You're not getting a free ride to the playoffs anymore. Those days are over. Winnipeg, even if they should drop, it won't be because they drop because they're not as good or close enough to as good as they've been in the past. It's because of teams like Saskatchewan that are improving, right? And I put Edmonton in that category as well, where I think Edmonton is ready to be a big part of the playoff push in first place. So where does that put BC? We've just mentioned 3 teams. So for them to be the 4th team, they'd have to hope to cross over into the East. Well, the East isn't going to be that much of a pushover anymore. The 2 and 16 playoff team, it doesn't exist anymore. 4 and 14, or it's now to make the playoffs anywhere. I think in the league, you have to be close to 500, and being close to 500 is going to keep you close to everybody else, because I don't think there's going to be the kind of domination we've seen these past couple of years. I think this is going to be a year where there's going to be a game difference between each position. It won't surprise me at all that there'll be 3 wins difference from the top team to the bottom team. Might even say 3 wins from the top team to the team that doesn't make the playoffs. It's going to be that kind of year, David. I really think this is probably going to be the most competitive year, and it started last year. The year before that, I think it's going to progress even further to being very competitive.
I definitely think that this is going to be when people say, this team was just 10-8 or this team was just 9-9. That might not be indicative of how good a team is. I think the CFL, we've come to expect that when a team is got a certain record, don't overlook that team. That just because they have that record doesn't mean they're not a good team. It's just the competition is that much tougher. Like Toronto, when they only lost 1 game a couple years ago. Yeah, they were a really good team, but they lost to a team that didn't have that record. And so I think records are just sometimes it's like you can get too bogged down on what a team finished with. Obviously, yes, it usually does indicate which team is considered the favorite and all that. But this year, I think you're going to see a lot of teams closer to that 500 mark. The competition, unless certain teams are just going to really face plant and really struggle, and that's going to lead to some bloated records for other teams. But I don't know if that's going to be the year.
I see a couple of candidates for that kind of fall flat on their face. I see a candidate, one at least. That's very possible that'll happen. But like you said, and like I said, it's going to be very competitive. And that competition, is going to be something that's going to be based on the way the team's Canadian talent is. I think the Canadian talent now, because of the dominance of some Canadian players, not necessarily at offensive line, but other positions, and now as much as quarterback, we're starting to see that the Canadians are starting to put their hands, their handprint on the league. The league is really controlled by the great Canadian talent that's on each team. This year, probably more than any other year, we're seeing it in the draft. The draft was it was an incredible draft when you think about the NFL draft and how, usually the NFL draft is something that, you're seeing, okay, did they draft a Canadian? Now it's no longer just drafting a Canadian, it's drafting Canadians, and not just drafting Canadians, but drafting Canadians in the second and third and sometimes even the second round. So, Canadian talent, as it gets better, increases the quality of the Canadian Football League. Maybe not because of the players who are at the top of that class, but the ones who are in the middle are a lot higher than the ones that were in the middle 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, I think, and like you talked about the crossover. I think it was almost a possibility this year, but then Hamilton, not Hamilton, sorry, Ottawa really made sure that they didn't fully drop off the way that they did. So I'm going to be very curious. I think, I mean, we'll talk a lot about the two divisions of which ones are going to be better than the others, but I think we're going to see a very, very competitive CFL this year. Like, this might be one of the more competitive years because every team has a pretty decent quarterback. Every team feels like they've gone better in some ways during free agency. I'm very curious to see which team is going to be the surprise. Either they're going to fall short of expectations or they're going to exceed expectations.
There's going to be a minimum of 2 that you'll be able to fit into that class.
Yeah.
A minimum of 2 that I see, at least 2 candidates on both sides of that equation. And you know, the thing of it is, the other more important factor that is good about the Canadian Football League is that because ownership is so set and there isn't any concern with ownership, there's a concentration on the teams and the general managers to do the work of a football team and not worry about the other stuff, you know, and it is a distraction. That other stuff can be a distraction because it has its fingerprints on how the GM operates, whether they have a GM, whether they have a coach, players, the relationship with players, the organization when it's in a stable and really good situation. That's one thing the players don't have to worry about because we've experienced, David, what happens when you have questionable ownership. Players go, that happened to Montreal the other 2 years ago, where players left because they didn't know what was going to happen there. Is the team going to survive? All those silly questions, and that affects the way the team plays. So we've got every team no team has to worry about that kind of stuff right now, at least not that we know of at this point. And the players can be players, the coaches can be coaches, and the general managers can be general managers. And the game can be the game. It's all about the game, not about the outside influences.
Well, that's it, right? You kind of want the you kind of want to be putting yourself in a position where you are allowing things. This is why the coaches cap always, like, I know Daryl talked a lot about the coaches cap being good for giving new opportunities, but in my opinion, I feel like it's also one of those where it's been detrimental to competition because you can still pay coaches good salaries. You can still go and get Canadian coaches, and I think maybe that's where I think the CFL is really, they could institute similar to how they've done it with similar to how they've done it with the roster. Institute, you need to have an X amount of Canadians on your coaching staff, right? You don't necessarily need to institute a cap to say you can't spend this much or that much. And that to me is, I think, the bigger I think that's the bigger, in my opinion, that's got to be the biggest challenge for the CFL is how do we ensure that the competition is at its best without it being impacted by what's going on on the stuff going on off the field.
Absolutely. The game is what matters. David, training camp. Now, what have you heard that's going around in training camp that might be worth mentioning?
Well, Chad Kelly, the big one there is they're going slow. They want him to get that strength back in his leg. So the benefit, and they knew this when they brought Nick Arbuckle back, was Chad Kelly might not be ready. So I thought him being fully ready to go for training camp was a bit of a pipe dream, in my opinion. I thought that was ambitious, but it's a very tough injury. It's going to take time for, it's going to take time for an injury like that to heal. So his status will be one to watch. There aren't a lot of it's not like there's a lot of battles on the field too for starting jobs or things like that. So I just want to see which teams are, which teams are getting their competition, the right competition. And what's Winnipeg going to do week 1 are their first. Sorry, I think they're off week 1. I think their first game is week 2. What's going to happen at the quarterback position for them with Zach not playing? And does that?
It's just a game, right? It's just
It's one game. We also know that it's not. With Zach Claros, it's like you got to be ready for anything to happen. The reason they lost that Grey Cup, they didn't have a guy ready to step in for Zach Claros. This year, Shea Patterson seems to be the guy that maybe you look at as a potential as the one that's gonna take the mantle there. But yeah,
well, the last two Grey Cups. Well, this not the one with Montreal. The 2 Argo ones were done, and the quarterback that won the game didn't start it. So to your point, that's the message that's out there. It isn't something that's a secret. For sure. And the thing I think is great for Arbuckle is that the injury that if the downside is Kelly not being able to start, the upside is Arbuckle gets to do a victory lap at the stadium, right? He gets to start as quarterback, and he was the winning quarterback, so he gets to get on the field and listen to the love of the fans for winning the Grey Cup. Because it'll be the Argos' first chance, their first home game, because they won't be playing any exhibition games in BMO. So their first home game is going to be the first time Toronto fans, at least, that don't do the trek to Guelph or Hamilton, get a chance to see their Grey Cup quarterback and thank him and salute him for the great play and that Grey Cup victory.
Well, that's it, right? For him, and I think I know Dinwiddie has come out and he said like Cameron Dukes, they're always going to look to see what they can do to get him going. I would suggest that Arbuckle's obviously going to be the one to get the start. He's the one I think Dinwiddie has the most trust in. But I do think that, I think there's a bit more that I want to see. Does Cameron Dukes have a real opportunity here to maybe put yourself in a position to try to compete for a job? I think it's Arbuckle's job to lose in terms of starting it out the season, because I don't expect Chad Kelly to be ready. I don't think that's going to be possible.
Arbuckle wasn't the backup quarterback.
Yeah. Cameron Dukes lost the job last year. I think also Cameron Dukes
due to an injury, right? He had a little bad luck too, because he had an inopportunistic injury.
Yeah.
Right? With bad luck for him that he didn't get a chance to show that he could lead the team to the Grey Cup. But, as is the case, we talk about the importance of not just one quarterback in the Canadian Football League. We've seen proof of it over and over again. So, yeah, it'll be great to see what he can do, because he's a good quarterback. He's had some great games, and the injury, caused him a problem, obviously. And around the league, we've got ourselves some really good quarterbacks that are backups, like we talked with Daryl. And I see where they are, and the decision to be there has been made because they know there's a good chance for them to get in. That's the reality of it. Because if you're signing with Saskatchewan, you're saying, well, let's see, what are the chances? There's a good chance I'll get in a game, right? If you go there. And then when it comes to, Caleros, he's coming off an injury at the Grey Cup. Now he's coming off a suspension. If you're a backup quarterback in Winnipeg, you're getting a start right off the bat to show the team maybe, you need more consideration. And these are the opportunities quarterbacks look for. And there's plenty of quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League, at least in relation to the way it was 6, 8, 10 years ago. There's more quarterbacks that could step in, that are ready to step in. And that's the thing. They're ready to step in. They've been through the integration into the Canadian Football League.
Well, Winnipeg has 5 quarterbacks at camp. One is the Bison's quarterback, who's just there on an internship program. But they got 4 other quarterbacks: Chris Trevor, Terry Wilson, who took over for Claus in the Grey Cup, Patterson, and Chase Artopius. Artopus? I don't know how to pronounce the last name. Apologize on that one, but like I think teams are realizing you need to be more prepared more than ever for your quarterback to suffer potential injury and be ready for it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to let that be the last word.
Thank you.
Or let you say the last word. What have we mentioned that we will mention and maybe something we'll talk about next week? I guess we'll get into more detail in training camp. How's that?
Yep. More training camp. There's something that they talked about with concussions. It takes a little bit more of a deeper dive on. But yeah, we can do that next week.
All right. David, thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Frank.
And Daryl Davis was our guest. Thanks again to Daryl Davis for taking the time to be here. And thank you for watching. I'm Candid Frank. He's David Morisuti. Thank you for watching CFL Talk. You can catch us on Candid Frank's Danishi at YouTube, 10:30. Thanks. Bye.